So we'll call this one What Happened in March 2020. So what I'm talking about here is the deaths that occurred, and those deaths actually were very, very important, or the fact that deaths were reported in terms of creating the fear that then led to people calling for lockdowns. And remember, you know, we have to call for stuff before they feel brave enough to impose it. Anyway, I know there'll be people that straight off will be saying care homes and Matt 1, 2, 3, 4, Daz 5, 6, 7, 8, Lamb. Yeah, I know, and of course they're right, of course. But I think there's more to it than that. What I'm thinking about in particular is that place in northern Italy, Bergamo. Because I know some of the images of like the coffins and all of that had been faked, or they actually were coffins, but it wasn't from Bergamo. You know, just a photo from the past had been misattributed to 2020 Bergamo. But and I guess the other thing as well, just to short circuit this in the comments, is, you know, the whole issue of V, I, R, U, S. Yeah, so it's a subject of well, it's a topical subject, isn't it? Do they exist? Do they not exist? Judging from what I see on the comments on my own channel, any mention of those little things that begin with V, comment gets deleted immediately. So, you know, the whole issue of do they exist, don't they exist? My own kind of feeling about it is, well, you can guess, right? Because I've just got to be careful about censorship, which again I suppose tells you something in its own right. But many of you'll know that well, it's nearly coming up to 2 years ago now, I radically changed my diet. So I ditched all the peasant carbs, so no more pasta, rice, potato, bread, and just kind of like peasant fodder, you know, things like carrots and stuff like that. So what I've noticed since then is that I've not had what people call a cold or a flu since then. And certainly when I was a teacher, it was always like coming up to Christmas, or actually once the Christmas holidays started, I'd very often have what people call a cold or a flu. Now, you know, the traditional explanation is the little V, isn't it? The little bogeyman that can jump from one person to the next. But you know, the way I feel about this now is that I think there's probably a good chance that maybe it was some sort of malnutrition of some sort. My body it was basically a vitamin deficiency maybe, or didn't have enough protein. I wasn't intaking enough protein. Of course, as well, living in England in December, it's, you know, very dark and cloudy and rainy. Also at that time of the year as a teacher, working in the school that I did, tons of reports had to be written, parents' evenings. It was full pelt, so I was probably working 65, 70-hour weeks easily. So I think obviously the overwork, stress, malnutrition, lack of sunlight, I think that's what was happening, rather than any invisible bogeyman, you know, that begins with V. Now my own feeling about let's call it the Chinese cough and sniffle, yeah, is it never existed. Apart from the fact that it existed in people's minds, you know, it was entirely imaginary. because the TV told them. Without the TV, then there's no way that people would, because it was just so obvious. But what I do think is real is that human beings can be poisoned. So you could think about, I don't know, food poisoning. That definitely exists. When you eat something that's got too much kind of nasty bacteria in it, your body then has to kind of cleanse that. And I don't know, would you call biological weapons? Yeah, I guess you could use poisons in an offensive way. Either, I don't know, World War One and gas warfare and whatever. But do you remember the film V for Vendetta? Loads of predictive programming in that film, which I've talked about before. Right-wing populist government introducing something that looked like fascism at a time where there's kind of a civil war down ethnic religious lines that mirrors exactly the type of civil war that they want to create now between a particular religious group and the rest of the British population. So the idea of predictive programming is that if the sheeple have seen it on TV, they're more likely to accept it in real life at a point into the future. Anyway, one thing in that V for Vendetta film that's mentioned is the kind of the dictator kind of seizes power, and there's like some sort of medical emergency, and it comes about as a result of a kind of a false, I suppose you'd call it a false flag attack, whereby the kind of corrupt cartel running this country, they poison the water supply. So this is my kind of idea, I think, is that could that have contributed maybe to some of the deaths that occurred in February, March in 2020 in places like Bergamo? Maybe.
Suggests that their target should not be an enemy of the country, but rather the country itself. 3 targets are chosen to maximise the effect of the attack: a school, a tube station and a water treatment plant. Several hundred die within the first few weeks.
And how easy would it be to poison the water supply? I've got an idea about what exactly it was that they used to poison the water supply as well. I'll talk about that in a minute, but what I'm getting at here is that they needed to create some fear in early 2020, and maybe this is what they did. I know most of the kind of the people disappearing, it was old people in care homes and the Matty thingamajig. I know all of that, so please don't kind of write about that in the comments, but I think in places like Bergamo there was something else going on too, and it wasn't a deadly invisible bogeyman that was doing it. So what we're talking about here is something called Legionnaire's disease, and this is what the Wikipedia says about it. I'll just edit some of this. So it's a form of atypical pneumonia caused by any species of Legionella bacteria. So note, that's bacteria, not a virus, yeah? Signs and symptoms include a cough, shortness of breath, high fever, muscle pains and headaches. There might also be nausea, vomiting and diarrhea. Which sounds very, very similar, I think you'll agree, to something else. The thing that, the new thing that happened or supposedly new, that happened in 2020. So this bacteria, it's normally found in fresh water, and it can contaminate hot water tanks, cooling towers of large air conditioning units, and typically it's spread by breathing in mist that contains Legionella, this bacteria, note, not a virus, and can also occur when contaminated water is aspirated. Typically, it doesn't spread directly between people, and most people who are exposed don't become infected. But I'm guessing here what happens is that if you could get something that might look as though it's infectious, so because if, for example, a swimming pool was, or maybe a mains water supply, like in the film V for Vendetta, was deliberately contaminated with Legionella, then everybody in the vicinity who drank that water would go down with the same sickness. So with Legionella, or you could call it something else, the Chinese cough and sniffle, couldn't you, if you wanted to? And it might look as though it was infectious, when really what it was just a common external environmental factor that was causing a lot of people in the same geographical area to suffer from the same illness. It also says that there are risk factors. So people who are older, people who smoke, people who've got chronic lung diseases and a compromised immune function. I think, what do they call? Yeah, this was very, very similar to the 2020 cough and sniffle, wasn't it? People who had, what do they call it? Significant pre-comorbidities or something like that. It says that there's no Britney Spears available for Legionella, and prevention depends on good maintenance of water systems. So again, if you were some sort of a terrorist intent on spreading biomedical fascism, then how easy would it be to tamper with water systems? Again, the signs and symptoms, they normally come within 2 to 10 days of being in contact with the bacteria, note, not virus. And it says those with Legionellas usually have fever, chills and a cough, which may be dry, which was also something that we saw with the old Divock 91. So basically that's my hypothesis. I would not be surprised that many of the deaths in places like Bergamo was down to some sort of biomedical terrorism, and there wasn't really anything contagious going on there. What it was maybe was something like Legionella, something that was, people were poisoned. So it wasn't a contagious disease, it was just the fact that I think that some people were in a particular area drinking water that had been poisoned with a type of bacteria. So that could actually give the illusion, couldn't it, of an infectious disease where there wasn't one. If you poison a group of people at the same time, you could then come up with the hypothesis that the disease has spread from one person to the other, and there's an invisible bogeyman at work. So what I'm talking about here is Legionnaire's disease. So I'll actually just run you through some of the kind of features of this thing now, and then you can tell me in the comments whether you think it's likely. For me, I certainly wouldn't discount this theory on the grounds that the government aren't terrorists and they wouldn't harm their own people, because of course they're very prepared to do that. There's also something else that was pretty weird that I saw on YouTube back in spring, maybe in February, maybe in March 2020, and that was some footage that was shot in a London Underground train, and it featured some people smearing a substance onto, like a gel of some sort, onto on an underground train you've actually got those kind of things that you can grab hold of inside the carriage to stop you kind of like falling over when the train's accelerating or decelerating. I'm not saying that is it could be a different type of poison, you see. You know, it might not have all been Legionnaire's disease. There could have been other toxins, you know, that could have caused people to be ill when, you know, at a time when the government wanted to try to suggest that there was an invisible bogeyman reaping havoc. Now, the other thing that I remember too was those videos. They very, very quickly disappeared. So again, you know, that kind of makes me think that maybe something was going on there. So conclusions then. First conclusion, again, just to cut off idiots in the comments basically saying, oh yeah, but most of it was care homes and you know, Matt thingamajig, you know. Yeah, I know that, right? So you don't need to write that because I already know it. So don't waste your time doing that. What I am saying is there could have been other things going on to try to create an illusion that there was a deadly invisible bogeyman when really there wasn't. And that's where, you know, this idea of the water supply, that would be so easy for them to do. How many people would have to be in on it to poison the water supply? You know, not many at all. And then the other one would be, you know, the tube train type stuff. In fact, something else I remember from back then was that there was a phenomenon that wasn't censored, that was actually pushed by the YouTube algorithm, which was crazy bad people who had the invisible bogeyman licking packages and stuff like that, you know, to spread the invisible bogeyman. And maybe what that was all about was creating a cover story, just in case somebody saw somebody doing something untoward, you know, spreading toxins onto food products or onto surfaces that a lot of people would end up touching. I don't know, maybe door handles or these grab hold things on the tube. Second conclusion is, you know, the common give me a C, give me an O, give me an L, give me a D, and you know, give me an F, give me an L, give me a U. I don't think those illnesses are, this is just my feeling about this, I don't think those illnesses are kind of spread by invisible bogeymen from one person to the other. For me, I think that's people have been eating the wrong food, not enough sunlight, too much work, not too much stress. However, that's not to say that infectious diseases don't exist. So I'm not sure about it, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, you know, the one that kind of springs to mind is what we call chicken pox. So and again, it doesn't actually have to be the virus, does it? The virus theory. You know, is it possible for maybe something else small that you can't see, maybe bacteria or some sort of a fungal infection? Is that possible to move from one person to the other? I don't know, is my honest answer to that. But I think the whole deadly virus thing, you know, the wintertime stuff, not having that at all. I think, you know, you've got like that norovirus. That's just a fancy name for food poisoning, isn't it? You know, sort of like nasty bacteria on one person's hands. Maybe they've not been washing their hands properly after going to the toilet, and they touch stuff, and then other people get the kind of bacteria on their hands and they eat stuff without washing their hands. And actually, just thinking about it, I remember back in spring 2020 the school nurse actually said, you know, like, make sure you do wash your hands. And then what happened during the peak of the People's Pantomime was that in terms of the kids, absenteeism dropped like a stone. So make of that what you will. However, amongst staff there was quite a few lazy bar stewards, and they took full advantage of the asymptomatic bogeyman disease to have some days off, and it was always the usual culprits. And I think one other thought as well is that, you know, when people do say that they're sort of sick, I think what's happening is that there's a reason for it. You know, the body's basically is trying to get you to rest, sit down and rest, whilst the body detoxifies itself. And you know, basically they need you reserve. We need to go through a process of detoxification. You need to take it easy, and I think that's what the function of these things are. You know, people feel a bit ill, sniffy nose or whatever, rest up, restore, and then you carry on, don't you? And also you could say maybe the reason why, you know, usually in a lead up to Christmas in a school there's more absenteeism is, you know, maybe everybody's eating the same crappy food, maybe everyone is suffering from the same lack of sunlight, maybe everybody is kind of like a bit overhyped. Yeah, so make of all of that what you will, and tell me about where I've gone wrong in the comments, and God bless.